I feel like there is an ocean between us. Like I'm on a desert island, waiting for you to rescue me. A message in a bottle, my only hope. I miss you, Molly. Save me, please. Stranded, Amy.
On March 24, 1998, exactly 1 month after Amy Bradley wrote to her ex-girlfriend this message in a bottle, she disappeared from a Royal Caribbean ship in Curaçao. She has been missing ever since. Amy Lynn Bradley was born May 12, 1974, in Petersburg, Virginia. Amy was the daughter of Ron and Iva Bradley and the older sister to Brad. When Amy and Brad were still kids, their family moved to a quiet, wooded neighborhood in Chesterfield County, just outside of Richmond. Amy was a natural athlete. From a young age, she threw herself into every sport, but basketball quickly became her biggest passion. And she was good. So good, in fact, that colleges across Virginia and nearby states began to notice. During her senior year of high school, she received multiple scholarship offers. After earning her degree, she set her sights on a master's in sports psychology. At 23, she was living in her own apartment, her first time truly on her own. Also, she had recently accepted a new job with a computer consulting firm and was due to start upon returning home. At the same time, Ron Bradley, Amy's father, had won an all-expenses-paid Caribbean cruise through his employer. Amy didn't want to go. She said she was afraid of big ships, not the ocean itself, and not swimming. She was actually a great swimmer. She had been a lifeguard, had spent years in the water, but something about being on a massive cruise ship far from shore made her deeply uneasy. It was strange. She'd never expressed anything like that before, but in the end, she agreed to go. Amy, her parents Ron and Iva, and her younger brother Brad flew from Virginia to Puerto Rico to board Rhapsody of the Seas, a Royal Caribbean International cruise ship, on the afternoon of Saturday, March 21, 1998. The ship was bound for several stops in the Caribbean, including Curaçao, a Dutch island off the coast of Venezuela. No one could have known that just 3 days later, Amy would vanish, without a sound, without a clue, and without ever being seen again. Amy was seen exploring the ship and interacting with members of the onboard calypso band Blue Orchid. She was outgoing, athletic, and by all accounts, enjoying herself. That evening, she had professional portraits taken with her family, which later became widely circulated in media reports. Amy was last seen in the early hours of March 24, 1998, aboard Royal Caribbean's Rhapsody of the Seas, which was sailing from Oranjestad, Aruba, to Curaçao. That evening, Amy and Brad attended a dance party at the ship's disco on Deck 9. They were drinking. The band, Blue Orchid, was performing. Amy was photographed and videotaped dancing closely with one of the band's members, Alistair "Yellow" Douglas. 1 a.m., Douglas later claimed he left the party at this time. 3:35 a.m., Brad returned to the family cabin. His keycard entry was logged electronically. 3:40 a.m., Amy followed 5 minutes later. She and Brad sat talking on their private balcony before Brad went to bed. Amy stayed outside a while longer. She said, "I don't feel too good. I'm going to sit right here with all the fresh air and the wind," Brad recalled. "I told her I loved her and see her tomorrow." 5:15 to 5:30 a.m., Amy's father Ron woke briefly and looked out at the balcony. He later stated he could see Amy's legs stretched out on the lounge chair and assumed she was asleep. 5:30 to 5:45 a.m., 3 separate witnesses later told authorities they saw Amy on the upper deck with Alistair Douglas. She was reportedly holding a camera and was handed a dark drink. Douglas was then seen leaving the area alone shortly after 6 a.m. 6 a.m., Ron woke up again and noticed Amy was no longer on the balcony. Her shoes were still in the cabin, but her cigarettes and lighter were missing. He assumed Amy had stepped out for coffee or to take photos of Curaçao's port. But when he couldn't find her on deck, he searched the ship for over an hour before alerting his wife, Eva. 6:30 a.m., the family alerted the ship staff. The family immediately asked crew members to prevent passengers from disembarking and to make an emergency announcement. Their request was denied, and they were told it was too early. When we discovered Amy missing, we begged the ship's personnel to not put the gangway down, to not allow anybody to leave the ship, Iva said. And we told them that if Amy had left the room for any more than 15 minutes, she would have left us a note. And they put the gangway down anyway. People left the ship in Curacao. The captain of the ship reportedly agreed to help search for Amy, but allegedly refused to seal off the ship or make any announcements about her disappearance for fear of panicking other passengers. 7:50 a.m. First public announcement was made. The ship broadcasted a message, "Will Amy Bradley please come to the purser's desk?" By this time, passengers had already begun disembarking for the day's port call in Curacao. Between 12:15 p.m. and 1 p.m., crew members conducted a full ship search, but no sign of Amy was found. The Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard conducted a 4-day aerial and sea search around the waters near Curacao using helicopters and a radar-equipped plane. No trace of Amy was found. Royal Caribbean chartered a private boat to continue the search after the official effort ended. Authorities initially considered the possibility that Amy had fallen overboard or taken her own life. However, Bradley's family has dismissed the possibility that she fell overboard, citing her strong swimming skills. She was a trained lifeguard. Shortly after Amy disappeared, one of the first people that the FBI questioned was the bass player on the cruise ship, Alistair Douglas. A videographer on the cruise ship found footage that showed Amy dancing with him in the middle of the night, hours before she went missing. Douglas said they parted ways around 1 a.m., when he, as a staff member, had to exit the ship's passenger area. Douglas said that they danced together briefly and that she was smoking a lot of cigarettes at the time. "I grew up in Grenada, and growing up in Grenada, you hardly ever see people smoke," he recalled in an October 2024 interview. Douglas asked Amy why she was smoking so much and said he was stunned by her reply. The musician claimed that she told him her father was an insurance manager or something like that, and that he found out that she's gay and he forced her to come on the cruise. The FBI found no evidence to charge him with Amy's disappearance, and his polygraph test was inconclusive. In 1999, the Bradleys filed 2 lawsuits against Royal Caribbean. They sought damages for alleged negligence, defamation, and intentional emotional damage. Royal Caribbean said it acted appropriately and responsibly at all times. A statement at the time added, "We're sorry. Despite all these efforts to assist the Bradley family, they've apparently decided to direct their grief at the company by filing a lawsuit seeking financial damages." The company also said it had fully cooperated with law enforcement authorities and said crew members had voluntarily undergone polygraph tests given by the FBI. The lawsuits were dismissed in 2000. What was a big part of the lawsuits being dismissed was that it was found the Bradley family had lied in court. A judge called out the family for making numerous exaggerated claims under oath that had no basis in the law. The lawsuits were dismissed after it was found Amy's parents, Iva and Ron, had perpetrated a fraud on the court by giving false answers to the defense in depositions. The judge is reported to have found the Bradleys failed to disclose contact with witnesses who contradicted their claims that Amy had been taken from the ship against her will. The Bradleys defended their actions and said they had good reason to believe Amy is still alive. They insisted they only withheld information for a short time and later shared all info that had been requested by Royal Caribbean's lawyers. Since her disappearance, several individuals have claimed to see Amy. 24 March, a cab driver claimed to see Amy on the island. That same morning, a local taxi driver told the Bradleys he had seen a barefoot young woman matching Amy's description, frantically searching for a phone. In April 1998, Ron and Brad returned to Curacao to search for Amy with the aid of police. A local cab driver said he recognized Amy from a flyer and told Ron and Brad that she had approached him minutes after the ship docked, frantically looking for a phone. Brad said that days later he heard Amy call his name from a passing van. "I heard Amy call my name, pretty distinctive all my life, the way she would say my name and call me," he said. They began following the van, but Amy wasn't inside. A Canadian tourist named David Carmichael was scuba diving in Curacao in August 1998, when he believes he spotted Amy, flanked by 2 people, on the beach. He didn't pay any mind to the group at first, until Amy tried to get his attention. The minute she heard I spoke English, She picked up her pace and was putting distance between her and the two people who were flanking her, Carmichael recalled, on Vanished, adding that within seconds, she was only about 3 to 4 feet from him. Just as she was about to speak, Carmichael alleged, the men pulled Amy into a restaurant. Carmichael followed them, noticing a scar on Amy's right shin and that she was pointing to her tattoos, which matched all of Amy's. I was 2 feet away from her, 2 feet. That's how close I was, he claimed. I don't even have to think about it. It's 100%. Not even 99%. It's 100%. It was her. Authorities searched the area after getting Carmichael's tip, but didn't find any sign of Amy. In January 1999, a Navy petty officer reportedly visited a brothel in Curacao and said a woman told him her name was Amy Bradley and asked him for help. He told her there was a naval ship about 5 minutes away, but she responded, "No, you don't understand. Please help me. My name is Amy Bradley." The officer didn't take action, Ron told NBC News, in part because the officer wasn't allowed to be in the brothel, and because he didn't know anyone by that name was missing until he saw a magazine cover with Amy's face and name on it. April 2003. Witnesses saw a woman matching Amy's description in San Francisco. She appeared frightened, and 2 men noticed she had been recognized and forcibly took her away. March 2005. A witness in Barbados reported seeing a woman in a department store restroom who whispers, "My name was Amy," and she was accompanied by several men and appeared distressed. Also, in 2005, Amy's parents received an email with 2 images of a woman known as Jazz, featured on a sex worker site. The woman resembled Amy and appeared despondent. Facial recognition experts later stated the photos were highly likely to be Amy, though the FBI could not confirm their authenticity. Many people believe that the woman in the photographs is indeed Amy Bradley, although there has never been any official confirmation. The only semi-official comment came from a retired FBI agent who stated that in his personal opinion, the woman does resemble Amy. However, closer analysis of the images raises serious doubts. Follow-up photos from different angles reveal that the woman has no visible tattoos, despite the fact that Amy had several distinctive and well-documented tattoos, which were key identifiers in her missing person profile. A Taz the Tasmanian Devil tattoo on her left shoulder blade, a sun-dolphin combination on her right shoulder, a gecko or lizard tattoo around her navel, Chinese characters on her right ankle. These tattoos were prominent and easily recognizable, yet none of them appear in any of the photos linked to the alleged sightings, even when the woman's skin is clearly visible and well lit. Even Amy's brother Brad has publicly expressed skepticism. He pointed out several inconsistencies. Different nose with no protruding tip, no tattoos, blue eyes instead of green, and a noticeably shorter distance between the lips and the nose. Some also believe that the photo in question may have been taken years before Amy disappeared, based on the woman's makeup and hairstyle, which strongly resemble styles popular in the 1980s or early 1990s, rather than the late 90s. Additionally, there is a theory that the photos may have been digitally altered or photoshopped, possibly to enhance the resemblance to Amy, whether as part of a hoax or misidentification. January 2007, another report placed Amy at a restaurant in Aruba, dining with 4 unidentified men. However, none of the alleged eyewitness testimonies have been officially corroborated by law enforcement or the FBI. Amy's family is convinced that she is still out there, and they regularly update a website where they've posted family pictures because they've noticed that an IP address from Curacao and Barbados visits it around holidays, birthdays, and anniversaries, and dwells on the site for about 45 minutes. They hope it's connected to Amy, but they don't know for sure because the FBI can't get more information on the IP address since it's not from a U.S. carrier. But why is the theory that Amy simply fell overboard still the most likely scenario in this story, despite the fact that the parents insist it was a kidnapping? The technical design of the cruise ship Rhapsody of the Seas, from which Amy Bradley disappeared, has several features that support the theory that a person could fall overboard and vanish without a trace. The Rhapsody of the Seas cruise ship was built in 1997 at the Chantier de l'Atlantique shipyard in France. It is owned by Royal Caribbean. The vessel is approximately 279 meters, 915 feet long, with 12 decks, and has a maximum speed of up to 22 knots, about 41 kilometers per hour or 25 miles per hour. It is equipped with massive propellers and drive shafts, and the passenger cabin balconies, including Amy's, were located relatively close to the waterline, which is a critical detail. The standard height of balcony railings on cruise ships of this type is approximately 1.1 to 1.2 meters, about 3.6 to 4 feet. Amy was tall, 1.7 meters. If she sat on the railing or leaned against it, she could have lost her balance, especially given her physical condition that night. According to her brother, Amy was already out on the balcony because she felt unwell after drinking and decided to stay there to get some fresh air or calm down. She may have leaned on the railing or bent over due to nausea and simply lost her balance. Even though Amy was a trained lifeguard and experienced swimmer, falling at night from a height of 10 to 15 meters while intoxicated could have been fatal. She could have lost consciousness upon hitting the water and been pulled underneath the ship into the zone of the propellers or powerful wake. If she fell at night, no one would have heard it. She would have been underwater instantly. Within 5 seconds, she'd be completely out of sight. Ship mechanic, Royal Caribbean. The propulsion blades can literally boil the water. Any body would be sucked in, dismembered, or dragged down to a depth of 50 to 100 meters. Naval engineer. At speeds of 20 to 22 knots, the water behind the ship becomes extremely turbulent. The propellers, located beneath the stern, generate strong suction forces. If a person falls from the aft section or from a side balcony closer to the stern, they could be pulled under the hull. Outcomes may include being struck by the blades or dragged deep underwater, with the likelihood of survival being extremely low. In addition, in 1998, cruise ships were not equipped with man-overboard detection systems, such as infrared sensors, cameras, or automatic alarm systems. Even in the 2020s, these systems are still not mandatory across the cruise industry. This means that if Amy fell overboard at night, it's entirely possible that no one would have noticed, neither passengers nor crew. According to engine room personnel, due to the constant noise from engines, wind, and waves near the stern, it would have been impossible to hear someone falling into the water. The timeline of events also remains unclear. Some sources state that her father last saw Amy on the balcony around 5:15 to 5:30 a.m., but other accounts, including early statements, mention a time closer to 4:30 a.m. If the earlier time is accurate, then the ship likely had not yet arrived in port in Curaçao and was still in open ocean, which means Amy could have been swept away at sea with no chance of rescue. There are also several details suggesting that Amy never left the cabin. First, she left her shoes behind, so if she had gone out, she would have been barefoot. Her family never mentioned that any other pair of her shoes was missing, which could have suggested she changed shoes before leaving. The witnesses who supposedly saw her around 5 a.m. also never mentioned that she was barefoot, which logically would have caught their attention. The only person who allegedly saw Amy barefoot was a taxi driver, but again, this claim comes solely from the Bradleys themselves. The taxi driver never made any official statements and was never formally questioned. Moreover, considering the fact that the Bradleys were caught lying in court and had reportedly bribed witnesses, relying on their word alone is highly questionable. In fact, there is no concrete evidence that this taxi driver ever existed. Moreover, if one witness supposedly saw her barefoot and even remembered that detail, then why didn't any of the other witnesses who claimed to have seen her around 5 a.m. mention that she was barefoot as well? That's a detail that would have certainly stood out. Second, an equally important fact is that the cabin doors on the ship are quite heavy and it's nearly impossible to open or close them silently. According to her father, the balcony door was open, so if Amy had opened the main cabin door, it would have created a strong draft that would have at least woken everyone up and scattered things around the room. In such a draft, she wouldn't have been able to close the door quietly either. Also, there has never been any report that the door was found open. If we assume she did leave, she wouldn't have left the door partially open to avoid waking anyone. The abduction theory remains highly questionable. It's unlikely that traffickers or kidnappers would target a woman traveling with her entire family, as her disappearance would be noticed and reported almost immediately, making escape and transport extremely risky. Attempting such an abduction on a moving ship rather than in port or on land would be even more dangerous. They would have had to hide her on board for hours, increasing the chance of being caught. Furthermore, Amy does not fit the typical profile of a trafficking victim. She was in her early 20s, athletic, confident, and surrounded by family. Human traffickers tend to prey on vulnerable minors, often runaways or those they can groom gradually, not outspoken, capable young women who would resist and draw attention. As for the individuals who claim to have seen Amy, there is no concrete evidence that they actually saw her, or even that they were present in the locations they describe. It's also worth noting that the Bradley family has previously been accused of attempting to pay witnesses, which further complicates the credibility of such claims. More importantly, in almost every high-profile disappearance case, there are always people who come forward insisting they saw the missing person, often without any proof. In many cases, these statements turn out to be unreliable, exaggerated, or entirely fabricated. But then, why lie and bribe witnesses? What for? Here's why. The only person who truly saw Amy last was her brother. He was the final one to talk to her, and the last known person physically near her. So, if there were no people who allegedly saw her later, he would automatically become the first and only suspect in her disappearance. Even the father's claim that he supposedly saw her legs on the balcony doesn't necessarily prove anything. What if that wasn't true? What if he actually woke up at exactly 6 and Amy was already gone by then? What if, that night, there was an argument between the brother and sister? Now, what if the family is hiding something? What if they are deliberately pushing the kidnapping theory?
There's one huge thing people are missing about the Amy Bradley case that determines who the major suspect is. And I haven't heard people talking about it. And that one thing is the father saying he saw Amy on the balcony. Why is that important? That drives who the main suspect is, because that sighting establishes two things. One, that Amy was alive. Two, the time she was alive, which was 5:30. Think about it. He woke up, saw her, went back to sleep, woke up again at 6, she's gone. So he says she left the room. Because remember, in the press conference, when they asked him, could she have fallen off the balcony? He said, absolutely not. So he says she left. Okay. Who does that put under suspicion? Also, think about the brother. What did he say? When she got back from the party, they were talking, they were on the balcony, they were talking about what they're going to do the next day. And then she mentioned that the bass player made an advance at her. And then they continue talking about the next day, which I think that's weird. Where did that come from? That's odd. So with what the brother said, what the dad said, who's the suspect? The bass player. Okay, cool. Now, let's say the father didn't see Amy at 5:30. Who's the suspect? So the father and his wife get to their room, I think about 1:30 a.m., go to sleep. Let's say they wake up at 6 o'clock instead of 5:30. They wake up at 6, Amy's not there. Who's the main suspect? Well, the last person who saw her alive. It'll be the brother. So I would just say the brother is very fortunate that the father woke up, saw Amy's legs on the balcony, looked at the time, noted the time, fell asleep, and then woke up again after she had already left the room. If those events didn't happen like that, we would be talking about a much different outcome and storyline.
As for the supposedly increased attention from male staff toward Amy, again, according to her parents, it's important to remember that they categorically refused to accept her sexual orientation. Even 27 years after her disappearance, they continue to insist that she wasn't a lesbian and that she had a boyfriend, although none of her former girlfriends have confirmed this. Accordingly, her parents are doing everything they can to present their daughter as an object of male desire, simply to avoid accepting the fact that she was a lesbian. Moreover, if you've ever been on a cruise ship, you know that the staff are trained to show attention to guests. It's literally part of their job to entertain and engage with passengers. As for the guitarist, his behavior is entirely understandable. He seems like a typical womanizer who most likely talked to Amy with the goal of sleeping with her. When that didn't work, likely because Amy told him about her sexual orientation, his interest faded. To me, it makes perfect sense in the context of a conversation where she admitted she was gay and that her parents had dragged her onto the cruise against her will. In 2010, a human jawbone washed ashore in Aruba. Authorities initially linked the jawbone to the Natalie Holloway case, but declined to conduct DNA testing for Amy Bradley or any other missing individuals. 12 years to the day after her disappearance, a court officially declared Amy Lynn Bradley dead. Investigators have never recovered any physical remains. In the end, it's up to you to decide which version to believe and where the truth lies. Perhaps the saddest part is not just that Amy disappeared, but that despite all the debates about her fate, almost no one took an interest in who she really was. Her personal story, a girl who wasn't allowed to be herself, even within her own family, became the backdrop to a loud mystery. And in that shadow, she vanished. From the ship, and perhaps from a life where there was never a true place for her.